You find yourself on Thursdays, the first thing you want to do is go get a copy of the Dallas Observer. Wonder how old this newspaper is.
Well, come on in and find out all about it.
The Dallas Observer, the area's alternative newspaper. October 2nd, 1980 is when the first issue hit the newsstand. That's 8 years and several issues printed. Ken Kirk, the founder and original publisher of the Observer, passed away in July, but he left a legacy. Bob Walton is the editor of the paper, and he was there at the beginning. When you two sat down over a table or a cup of coffee or whatever, did you start to sketch down what type of paper you were going to put in and what you were going to do with it?
A little bit. We kind of both had the same plan in that we knew we wanted to do a newspaper that is referred to in the industry as the alternative press, meaning it's a Village Voice, New York Village Voice kind of paper. It's weekly, it's an alternative to the mainstream press, a little more progressive, a little more liberal, that kind of newspaper. And we knew of other papers around the country that already were fulfilling that role in other cities, and we knew that that was the kind of paper we wanted to bring to Dallas.
Did you ever charge for the Observer? Or has
No.
it always been free in the stands?
It's always been free, always will be free. That's part of the basic philosophy of the alternative press, is that the paper is free to people. It's something you can go in and pick up for free. That way you're guaranteeing to the advertiser that the person who picked up that paper was out in the city doing things. They're not a couch potato that sits at home every evening. You know, people who pick up the Observer are people who are out in nightclubs, in theaters, in bookstores. They're people who are out doing things, and that's the kind of reader we want.
When you say alternative, what do you mean by an alternative paper?
Well, alternative, I think I mean that we try to be a little more open-minded about things. Dallas is a very conservative city. Both the daily papers are very conservative. We try to be more open-minded. We try to encourage new ideas, new writing, new voices, things that, a good way to describe it, I think, these are not my words, somebody else once wrote it, but the mainstream press, daily newspapers, for example, are like going into McDonald's and getting a hamburger, or going into Burger King and getting a hamburger. It all tastes pretty much alike. Where the alternative press is like going to a potluck supper. You know, you get lots of different things made by lots of different people and lots of different tastes, and it's real unusual, and it's much more interesting than that McDonald's hamburger. You're going to find lots of entertainment coverage. You're going to find lots of listings of where to go, what to do, the best things to do on a weekend, things like that. That's sort of our meat and potatoes, our basic coverage that we give people. We try to be the best nightlife guide that's around, so that we've got a reason that people really need to pick us up. Then in addition to that, once we've gotten people to pick us up for that, we try to give them stories that we think should be important to them.
What about the personals? Man seeks woman, woman seeks man, adventures. Have they grown over the years? Or?
They have, yeah. I think those kind of caught on back in about 82, 83, around in there, and they've grown up to where we run about 300 now probably in any given issue, and they've you know, been something that people have sort of latched onto and associate with the Observer. You know, they're not a big part of our business really, but when people think of the Observer, they think about personal ads, because that's real different for the city. People hadn't seen that before. Some of the best reading really in the paper is to see what people say about themselves trying to get a date.
I like the editorials. And then I like the people that write in the next week about the editorial, the cover, the story, whatever, and they have the...
Yeah, one of our popular features, I think, is our letters to the editor, because we run almost anything. You know, we don't run anything, but we do get a few letters we can't run, but we run almost anything. We try to run all the letters we get. We don't have space for all of them, but we try to get as many as we can in there, as many different viewpoints and differences of opinion and stuff. And I think it's a popular section, because they're much more, we run longer letters. We don't, I mean, if you look in D Magazine and the daily papers and Time Magazine or anywhere, they edit all the letters from readers down to about one paragraph, just to get the basic gist of what they wanted to say in there. Well, we run the whole letter, you know, and I think people appreciate that. They want to hear everything that guy had to say about that subject.
Did you have problems, because as you say, conservative area around here, that you put the paper together, you started to get it out. Any bad feedback or like, hey, what's going on here?
Sure. Like, you know, when we started out, nobody knew here in Dallas what kind of newspaper this was supposed to be. I mean, everybody had kind of heard of the Village Voice, but maybe hadn't seen one or hadn't seen one in a long time. And they didn't know what to make of the Observer. You know, advertising sales were slow. We started out printing 25,000 papers and putting 25,000 papers on the street, and only 12,000 of them were getting picked up, you know, which was real discouraging at first. But it finally, you know, people got a feel for what we were trying to do with the paper, got a little more interested in it. Advertisers started coming around and seeing that it was a pretty good paper, and there were some, you know, people that they wanted as clients that were reading the paper, so they got a little more interested in it, and things started to click after a few months, but it was hard at first.
When did you see the difference? When did it start to catch on?
I think we saw the real difference when we got up to about 50,000 circulation, which was about 5 years ago, after about 3 years. The first 3 years was really a learning experience and catching on with advertisers. And a lot of the advertisers that are the bigger advertisers don't really want to talk to you until you've been there for 2 or 3 years to be sure that you're going to stick around. They don't want to advertise with somebody that's here today and gone tomorrow because it's kind of bad for their image. If you've been here for 2 or 3 years, then they'll start talking to you. And after 2 or 3 years, we were up to about 50,000 circulation, and that's when things really started to turn around.
Was it hard when you first started to find out where you wanted to put papers? Where you went in, I would like to put in a rack here, I would like to leave 20 or 30 papers, people going, oh.
Yeah, real hard. You know, our first 100 locations we got were the hardest 100 locations we've ever gotten because nobody knew who you were. They didn't know if they wanted your paper in their lobby or not, and it was real tough. Now we've got 750 locations, and if we want to go out and get 50 more, it's a lot easier because everybody knows about the paper, they know what it is, they know the guy down the street already has it in his lobby and that's working okay, so yeah, I guess you can put it in my lobby. You know, that last 50 we set up were the easiest.
Do people call you and ask you, could you please bring a rack over, or would you please bring 20 or 30 or 40 papers over a week?
Yeah, which we really can't do anymore because we print 78,000 copies. You know, we guaranteed our advertisers and we're audited on the fact that 75,000 of those 78,000 get picked up by people. And so all 78,000 of those papers are spoken for right now. And somebody calls and says, gee, I'd like for you to set up a stand out here in the lobby of my restaurant, and we have to tell them we'll get back to you in a couple months, you know, when we can increase our circulation a little bit. So it's turned around the other way now, where people are calling us wanting the paper, and we have to put them off.
How would you describe your newspaper?
I think it's a thinking person's newspaper. It would probably be easier to describe it as liberal than conservative. But on some issues, I think we're kind of conservative. On others, we're kind of liberal. I think it's mainly just a thinking person's newspaper.